I'm Evan Kutz, reporter with the Great Lakes Beacon. I'm seated here with Michigan's Attorney General, Dana Nessel. Ms. Nessel, thank you for taking the time to speak with me.
Yeah, my pleasure.
We're going to talk about some of the issues facing our state, as well as taking a look ahead at 2020.
Great.
Recently, you made some big headlines filing a lawsuit against 17 PFAS polluting companies. What do you think that the breadth and the scale of a lawsuit like that says to Americans?
Well, I mean, it was a significant lawsuit. I think it was one of the bigger environmental cases that's been filed, at least in the history of this state, perhaps nationally as well. And so we filed against 17 chemical manufacturers that actually are responsible, in my opinion, for the PFAS epidemic statewide and also nationally. So we've seen these lawsuits in other states, but unfortunately at this point, Michigan is really up there in terms of the amount of water supply that we've seen contaminated by PFAS, PFOS, PFOA, and we believe that these chemical manufacturers are responsible. They knew what was in their product. They allowed their product to be placed into other products that were disseminated all over the state of Michigan, and they understood what the consequences were going to be of doing that. And so we're looking at now about 1.9 million Michiganders who we know have their water contaminated by PFAS. We have another 2.5 million people that have to have their water tested yet, and it's costing the state $25 million a year just to test, not even to remediate. So we thought it was essential that we bring this kind of case forward, that we hold these companies responsible, and that in terms of the cost of the cleanup, that it not be borne by the taxpayers of this state, and that instead it was the companies that are responsible for this epidemic, that they bear the cost of cleaning it up.
You're right. According to the latest data, actually, Michigan is the state with the highest amount of PFAS polluted sites. Do you believe that it's important to make sure that Michigan is a leader in the fight against polluting companies and making sure that they're being held accountable?
Well, absolutely, but I don't look at it as I want to be the leader in this. I just want to help my state. That's what I promised to do. I mean, I was really vocal about this on the campaign trail. My predecessor, Bill Schuette, was actually asked by our then Republican Governor Rick Snyder to please sue 3M and the other chemical manufacturers, as had been done in other states. And so in states like Minnesota, which is a little bit different of an issue because that's where 3M is headquartered, but I mean, there was a recovery of $850 million in Minnesota, and I want the same for our state if I can possibly get it. I'm not going to say that there aren't going to be some hurdles and some potential complications. Our law in Michigan isn't very good in terms of holding polluters responsible, but it doesn't mean that I'm not going to do everything in my power as Attorney General to try.
You know, from Flint to PFAS to Line 5, there seems to be a lack of bipartisanship over issues of the environment and health. Why do you think that that is?
Well, I think it's very easy. It's not a lack of bipartisanship when it comes to the residents of our state. I think if you ask Democrats, Independents, Republicans, people who don't identify with any party at all, they'll all tell you that their drinking water, ensuring that they have safe, clean drinking water, is incredibly important to them. Where we differ is when you get into political office. And I think there's one big reason for that, and it's Citizens United. It's the fact that these chemical manufacturers and many other companies are allowed to, expressly purchase the votes of these legislators. And in fact, if you looked at some PFAS legislation that made it more difficult for us to hold these companies accountable that went through the lame duck legislature in 2018, you could see the lobbyists for these chemical manufacturers that were sitting in the gallery as the vote was being taken. And so when it comes to the residents of this state and the people who live here, I think everybody mutually cares deeply about the condition of their water and wants to make certain that their families are drinking water that is safe for them. It is not going to cause them to have cancer or any other kinds of issues or complications with their health, but we simply have to reform the system so that legislators are accountable to the people they represent and not to big corporate polluters.
Why don't you think that the message of voters is reaching representatives who are not voting for stricter regulations on polluters?
Well, I think that people have to start really holding their legislators accountable and to call them out for this when it happens. Clearly, gerrymandering has a lot to do with it. And I think that as we see the Redistricting Commission move forward and we redraw the maps after the 2020 census, hopefully we will have more bipartisanship on this issue, because you can't have people who are too far to the right or too far to the left in any district. They won't be competitive anymore. I'm hoping that things will change and that the change in the drawing of the maps will make a difference. But if not, we just really have to reevaluate so many different things in terms of campaign finance in our state because, literally it's these corporate actors are purchasing our legislators, and it's not helpful to the people who actually live here and have to drink our water or breathe our air or just have to walk around planet Earth. It's incredibly important that people know what their legislators are doing and that they hold them accountable.
Do you believe that there is a need to reform lobbying laws in Lansing?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And I'm very supportive of the work that Progress Michigan is doing right now in terms of trying to bring forward a ballot proposal that would allow for lobbying reform. It's essential, and many other states have that, and they operate perfectly fine with that system in place. But it's very hard when you have this revolving door, and I can't even tell you how many legislators, they get termed out of office, and we know that they get termed out very quickly in this state because we have the most draconian term limits of any state in the nation. And literally the very next day, they are knocking on your door as a lobbyist, now lobbying for the same things that they were voting on just a day earlier. And it really calls into question, when you know that somebody's going to be termed out and they're looking for their next job, are they voting for what's best for their constituents, or are they voting trying to line up whatever their next term of employment is going to be with one of those special interest groups that's out there buying their vote?
Let's talk about after you took office, you ended up removing Michigan from 28 lawsuits that your predecessor had joined, including cases pertaining to reproductive rights, gender discrimination, and separation of church and state. Since then, you've joined our state on several federal lawsuits, from clean air to food assistance and improving conditions for immigrant detention facilities. How would you characterize the differences and priorities between your department and that of your predecessors?
Well, it's a very different place. We are very different people, Bill Schuette and I. And our priorities are different. Our philosophy of the world is different. I ran on the premise of equal protection for all people in this state, and that's irrespective of race or gender or income or ethnicity or national origin or any of those types of classes. I think that we are all equal, and we should be in the eyes of the law. And so it was very important to me, first of all, to completely disassociate the state of Michigan from any lawsuits that would hurt any of our own residents. And I wanted to do everything possible that I could to protect the people that live in this state and to make certain that the law was treating them properly and that they were not being unduly discriminated against. Very simple. I am also a big proponent of women's rights, and I've made no secret of that. I believe in Roe v. Wade. I believe in the right to privacy. I believe in a woman's autonomy to make medical decisions for herself, and whether that's birth control or abortion rights. I can't believe that it's 2020 and we're still talking about these issues and we're still worried about these issues. And we know that the vast majority of Americans and the vast majority of Michiganders also believe in a woman's autonomy, and that these are personal, private, medical decisions made between a woman and her doctor, and they ought to remain so. And so, to me, I think we needed somebody in this office whose voice would be heard loud and clear on that issue, and that would be protecting and defending women's rights and protecting and defending the rights of all people who live in this state.
You were Michigan's first openly gay statewide elected official. What do you think that your election signals?
I think that essentially it's a couple things. One is that people hopefully don't care about that anymore. I don't think I got elected because of that. I hope I didn't get elected despite that. I think that I got elected because my message resonated with people. People thought that I had some good ideas, and they wanted to see the AG's office be one that really protected people in this state again. And I'm hopeful that whether you are married to a man and whether you're married to a woman, people are only going to care about one thing, and that's the work that you do in this office. And so hopefully what my election signaled is that that's not going to be a campaign issue anymore, and people will just elect the best person and not necessarily the straightest person.
Do you think that Michigan will have more diverse leadership in the coming years, from the legislature up to the executive office?
Oh, definitely. I mean, it's already happening. If you look at the state legislature right now, it looks so much different than it did just a couple years ago. And I mean, certainly you can say that about the executive branch. Not only do we have, 3 women who hold, the top 3 elected executive offices in the state, but we have a lieutenant governor who's a younger African-American man. So we're already seeing that. And I think that, The days of having, only older, straight, white Christian men in office are hopefully over. I mean, obviously there's a place for those individuals, but there's a place for the rest of us as well. And, one of the great things about Michigan is our diversity. We have so many different types of people that live here, and we all ought to have representation in Lansing. And I think a more inclusive government creates a government that is more representative of the people it serves.
There were many cases that you took up as the Attorney General in your first term. How do your life experiences inform your priorities when you took office?
Well, I'm really grateful for the experiences that I had as an attorney prior to taking office. And I did a lot of different kinds of work. I was a prosecutor. I was a defense attorney that worked on behalf of indigent defendants. I did a lot of civil rights work for minority communities that have been discriminated against, police misconduct work, finally 1983 actions, probate court work, family law. I mean, you name it, I sort of practiced it. And I hope that that's helped inform me a little bit better in terms of a lot of the issues that are out there facing everyday Michiganders. And so, I think when you have somebody who has spent their entire career representing people who are more fortunate, representing big corporations, representing people who didn't have the same needs that a lot of people have in our state, there's sort of a lack of empathy that's there. So people don't necessarily understand people who are less fortunate. Well, I worked with people who had all kinds of issues and all kinds of problems, and I just think it's been really great so that when I came to this office, I could better understand some of those issues, having worked with so many different types of people for so many years in a myriad of subject matters. And I think that that's been really helpful. But when I see people who have sort of been in this Lansing bubble for many, many years, and it's all they know is sort of what's inside state government, which is what happens when you work in state government for a very long time. It's not that that experience is incredibly helpful, because of course it is, but I like to take people outside of Lansing and just say, here, come to these various different areas and see what those people are experiencing. And I think when I do that, it really helps people better understand the plight of people who live in our state, everywhere around our state, and all kinds of people. And I hope that that's been helpful for my work.
What have you done to make the Attorney General's office more accessible to people across the state?
Well, a number of different things. One of the things we did is to expand to other offices that either didn't exist or had been closed for a long time. So we opened an office in the city of Flint, which was something that I had promised to do, and I thought that folks in Flint were significantly underserved and really deserve special attention due to obviously a variety of issues facing them over the last number of years. And we also now are opening an office in Marquette, and we actually just staffed that office, and so that's we're going to have a grand opening in the next few weeks here, I think it is. And I thought it was wrong that for folks who live in Gogebic that you would have to drive 14 hours to see somebody from your state AG's office. That's not right. So we wanted to have more offices so that it was easier for people to go and talk to somebody from our office. But the other thing that I've done is I spent a lot of time in the Detroit office, which was not traditionally done. Generally speaking, the AG was here in Lansing pretty much all the time. So I'm in Detroit a lot, and I meet with a lot of people in the Detroit area as a result. But I also get all around the state. So, I mean, I've been to counties all over this state in the time that I've been in office. And I think I did in the neighborhood of about 50 town halls on all kinds of different issues, on FOIA and OMA, the Freedom of Information Act and the Open Meetings Act, clean water issues, lots and lots of elder abuse town halls, and criminal justice reform. I mean, a variety of different issues. And we've gone all over the place. And so that allows people from communities all over Michigan to come and to actually sit down, meet with the AG, and to discuss and ask questions about the work that we're doing and to address the concerns they have.
So it sounds like your work's certainly keeping you busy. Do you feel that the state is adequately supporting your department with enough resources?
For right now, I'd say so. I guess get back to me after the 2020 budget is done, but we were happy with our budget that we received on September 30th. of last year. We could use a little bit more help. We have some major investigations underway, including our clergy abuse investigation, which is one of the biggest in the nation of its kind. So we could always use more resources, but you know, I'm pretty satisfied with what we have right now as long as that doesn't change.
And what are some goals for your department in 2020?
Well, where do I start? But I will say this. If I had to look at one issue that is really important to me that I'm hoping to actually get some resolution in some way, it would be the opioid epidemic and some of the cases that we're involved in with that. In December, we filed a lawsuit against 4 different distributors. But in addition, I'm involved with negotiations with a lot of the manufacturers and other distributors as well. And I would like to get some significant settlements of a lot of money that I can bring back to the state of Michigan that can be used for treatment programs and diversionary programs and drug court and, you know, emergency services, you name it. This state is suffering because of the opioid epidemic. The pharmaceutical companies and distributors, in my opinion, created that epidemic, and I'm looking forward to helping getting it resolved as much as possible in 2020.
Attorney General, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I'm Evan Kutz for the Great Lakes Beacon. Thanks for watching.